Hello and welcome to the News9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. Prime Minister Modi's third NDA government is beginning to take shape. But the clamour for cabinet berths has begun. And why? Because for 10 years, the BJP enjoyed a simple majority in parliament. It didn't need coalition allies for the 272 mark. It needs its allies to make up the 272 mark. Let's first look at the NDA breakup to understand why the BJP needs its NDA allies to form a government. Now, the NDA is 303 seats all told. The TDP is the single largest outside party. It's got 16 MPs. The JDU, Nitish Kumar's party, 12 seats. And the Shinde's Shiv Sena, 7 MPs. The Lok Janshakti party, 5 MPs. The HAM, 1, and MPs from 3 other parties make up 10 other members of parliament, making that grand figure of 303. And today we're going to talk about how the NDA and the BJP will divide those portfolios and what the allies demand from it. Let me start by introducing my guests for the evening. Joining us today in the studio are my colleague Brijesh Pandey, and joining us on Zoom are Dr. Anil K. Verma and Banuchandar Nagarajan. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus show. Brijesh, I want to start by asking you, what do allies really want in return for their support? What has been the history so far? We're entering an era of coalition governments of the kind that we haven't seen in a decade now. There is a very large number of young people in India who probably don't know what it is like to live in a coalition government.
Absolutely. I think, this is going to require a complete rejig of mentality and the mindset, because, BJP ran a tight ship, from 2014 till 2024, with an absolute majority. It didn't require any help from either, and a fairly comfortable majority rather, from any of its allies. Now, all of a sudden, it is facing a situation in which it's dependent on JDU, it's dependent on TDP, and then now, you have to factor in their demands as well.
Right.
And I think, one of the biggest challenge for the BJP will be to strike a balance, because, everybody right now would want the center cabinet berth.
Right.
So how do you make adjustment to it? How do you juggle key portfolios, keep the most important portfolio like, finance, defense, home to yourself, but then what happens to rural development, which is an extremely important ministry.
Yes.
People don't know much about it, but it's much important than, many of the prime key ministries, or what happens to agriculture, infra ministries and all. So I think, it will require a hell of a Herculean task for the government to make sure that, who gets what and how they are, placated also after once the distribution is done.
Of course. But, Brijesh, like you mentioned yesterday, the fact that the BJP has a fair number of MPs as compared to what Atal Bihari Vajpayee had back. He was less than 200 seats. So his dependence on allies was far greater than what Prime Minister Modi's is today. But be that as it may, you have two very key parties, the JDU with 12 seats and the TDP with 16 seats, and these are hard bargainers.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they are the past master when it comes to coalition politics.
Right.
And the reason why I said that we cannot compare Atal Bihari Vajpayee to the current dispensation is that he was surrounded by very powerful regional sata traps. Every party powerful in their state and with a mind of its own. So they were not ready to play second fiddle to anybody, forget playing it to the BJP.
Yes.
And that led to a lot of, heartburns and problem for the Vajpayee to maneuver around. Right now, I mean, if you take care of PDP and TDP and JDU, then the minor parties also know that, the elections are there in Bihar. So you can adjust some LJP there or HAM there. So you can adjust other parties in a slightly different way. Shiv Sena is not going to drive a tough bargain because assembly elections are literally around the corner.
100 days away.
Yeah, exactly. So they know that, the situation can change drastically from a position of strength to an absolute having no position or no say in the government.
But just let's look at what the TDP has been asking for, Brijesh. They are asking for the Speaker of the Lok Sabha, of course. Ministries like rural development, housing and urban affairs, ports and shipping, road transport and highways, Jal Shakti Ministry, MOS Finance Ministry, and of course what we discussed yesterday, the special economic package for Andhra Pradesh. And of course, let's not forget Amravati, the elephant in the room, the unfinished capital, Chandrababu Naidu's dream project. So I'm going to bring in Dr. Anil Verma here. Dr. Verma, TDP or the JDU, who's going to drive a harder bargain for cabinet berths? The requests are already started to pour in. Who will be tougher to placate? Who will be easier to manage?
I think this is, very difficult to answer because both are, in a very dictating position.
Yes.
And the Prime Minister will have to factor in their request.
Yes.
But one thing, let me tell you that both are, established leaders in their own states.
Right.
And their prime consideration is to be stable over there. And we should not forget that they are the kingmakers in Delhi.
Yes.
But it is the other way around also.
Right.
So that is one thing we have to remember. And the second thing, there are certain ministries, I mean, after 2003, that amendment, 91st amendment of the Constitution,
Yeah.
which now says that the Council of Ministers has to be at the maximum 15% of the strength of the Lok Sabha.
Yes.
So that means optimum 81 members in the Council of Ministers.
Yes.
So that's also a compulsion. There is an upper cap.
There's
Here
a
there
ceiling,
was not,
yes,
but
absolutely.
now, there is an upper ceiling that we have to always remember. So they also understand the compulsions of the constitutional compulsions, the size of the Council of Ministers. But at the same time, it is always, a good strategy to start with more things, and then of course there is a compromise. So both
Yes.
will have to compromise. Modi will have, there are 8 or 9 ministries which I suspect Modi
Yes.
will not be willing to cede to the opposition parties, which are
Right.
very, very important, like home, finance, external
Yes,
affairs, road transport, civil aviation,
Right.
Agriculture. So these are some of the very key, things which certainly the Modi government will like to retain.
Yeah, you have that core of the Cabinet Committee on Security portfolios that Dr. Verma was talking about: home, defense, finance, and external affairs. And in the last couple of decades, there's only been one minister who's entered that hallowed sanctum sanctorum, which is George Fernandez, who was also the NDA convener. Do you see the possibility of anyone from the current NDA entering the CCS ministries?
It doesn't look like. But what I would say that, if you're talking about TDP, they
Yes.
would be very interesting in various other ministries, which
Right.
doesn't occupy, or which, people sitting in Delhi or covering government
Right.
don't think is very important, but it's very important to their scheme of things.
Yes.
Rural development.
Right.
I think the real fight is going to be about the infrastructure ministries,
Right.
road development ministries, which Nitin Gadkari is currently
Right.
holding.
Right.
There's going to be massive fighting for those kind of ministries. Agriculture is one ministry,
Yes.
which, which there are 2 to 3 claimants, both TDP and JDU claiming
Right.
for it. So I think, these allies will try to go into for those kind of ministries more, because their
Yes.
outlay, as Raghuvansh Prasad made that ministry,
Right.
rural development, the entire fund of Manrega is there.
Yes.
When you're talking about people's politics,
Right.
defense doesn't help you.
Yes.
But rural development, agriculture, infra, it helps you to
Defense
have that.
especially doesn't help you because the Agniveer scheme is in now, and you
We are
cannot
already
even.
having,
you have
contrary
trouble
opinions which is
there,
coming out.
and you have the JDU raising noises. But here you have the 3 orbits that we're looking at. The core, of course, which is the CCS.
Railway is one ministry which they will go after.
Yes, the railways is one ministry that the allies will want to look at, obviously, because look at the huge capital outlay there, 2.5 lakh crore. I'm going to bring in Banuchandar Nagarajan. Banuchandar, why has railways been such a lucrative cabinet berth for all allies? If you look at it, historically from the NDA one, you have Mamta, you have Nitish, who've been railway ministers. Do you think people are going to make a play for that? The parties are going to ask for the railway ministry?
Before getting to the nitty-gritty, Sandeep, let's look at a couple of organizing principles, both from the political side
Yes.
and the policy side, and then we'll get into the details. If you look at the political side, obviously we are in the era of coalition politics,
Yeah.
and to keep the flock together, you need both carrots and sticks. Okay?
Yes.
So by carrots, you mean there's a need for consensus builders, people like Nitin Gadkari ji or Rajnath Singh,
Yes.
okay, who can go and pacify people, talk and build a consensus.
Right.
And you know who wields the stick. So I did not
Yes.
go into that. So there'll be these incentives, political incentives, players with, who bring these skill sets into the cabinet. Second thing is geographically, there'll be more representation in the Council of Ministers
Yes.
from the east, particularly
Yes.
West Bengal, Orissa, Telangana. And obviously, with the TDP in there, Andhra Pradesh and so on, right? So there will be that skew as well. Policy-wise,
Yes.
we have to look at what the government's priorities are. In the speech that the Prime Minister gave in the BJP party
Yes.
office, he mentioned he mentioned agriculture. Okay,
Right.
so I'm assuming that is going to be among the priorities, right? So
Right.
these are the governing principles. Now let's come to the ministries. The
Right.
ministries, I would like to divide into 3 tiers. Okay, the tier
Right.
1 ministries are like finance, defense, external affairs.
Yeah, the core
right?
ministries. Yes.
Yeah, the tier 2 ministries are what Brijesh was saying: agriculture, railways,
Yes.
okay, rural development, education, and transport, so on. And there are tier 3 ministries like culture, health,
Right.
etc., right? So shipping. So I think the tier 1 ministries are something that the BJP will retain for itself. The
Yes.
tier 2 ministries
Right.
will be given to the main partners, TDP and JDU, okay,
Right.
and the other smaller partners, right, like Shiv Sena, Eknath Shinde's party, or the
LJP.
Yes.
Ramvilas Paswan's party. Yeah, so all of these people will get the tier 3 ministries. So
Right.
I think this is how it will be organized. But who gets what
Yes.
will be fine-tuned later based on personalities and the other policy priorities of the government.
Right, absolutely. And Brijesh, this, coming to the railway ministry again, because it's in discussion that a lot of allies would want it. Given the fact that the railways was such a key ministry under Prime Minister Modi, over the last 5 years, you've had talk of the Vande Bharat trains, the flagship project of the government, and you have the bullet train project. Let's not forget that. That's due to be completed in this term of his government. Given the fact that there's so much riding on the railway ministry for the government, would they want to part with it and give it to an ally?
The question is not whether would they want to part with it. The
Yes.
question is whether they can retain it.
Right.
Bhanu, I agreed with most of what he said, but there was a slight disagreement with when you use the word carrot and stick.
Yes.
There is carrot. There is
Right.
no stick right now.
Right.
And the reason I'm saying why there is no stick is that politics is not ending right now.
Yes.
In this end of this year, you have election in two very crucial states.
Absolutely.
Maharashtra and Haryana.
And Haryana.
Chances are the BJP will lose both.
Right.
And given the kind of massive infighting which has erupted in
Yes.
Maharashtra,
Yes.
the NCP Shinde faction is like Ajit Pawar faction is down to the dome, and there's no there's only enthusiasm and
Right.
confidence in the other side.
Right.
Haryana, we have seen what Bhupender Singh Hooda has done and delivered.
Right.
Next year you start with Jharkhand and Delhi.
Yes.
More chances
Again,
of
critical
Arvind
states.
Kejriwal winning Delhi per se.
Right.
And then there is also the election of Bihar.
Yeah.
Boss, I don't see till 25 middle.
Yes.
BJP is in any position to exercise any kind of political muscle.
So more of
if you
carrot
lose
and less-
assembly,
yes.
If you lose two assemblies elections,
Right.
in Maharashtra and Haryana,
Yeah.
you will not be only in back foot in those two states. You
Yes.
will be back foot in the central ministry.
In the central
because
ministry.
you will
Right.
have a coalition, India coalition,
Right.
with 234 MLAs and a growing number of states which they would be governing.
Right.
So I think but till 2025 mid,
Right.
it is going to be 95% carrot and
95% carrot and 5% stick. Dr. Verma, important point that Brijesh mentioned, the fact that, given that in the next couple of months you're going to go into assembly elections, 4 very key elections, 2 states where the BJP is in the opposition and 2 states where it's ruling and where it could well lose. So given these factors at play, do you think it's 95% carrot, 5% stick, and therefore most cabinet berths are up for negotiation, especially for allies that come from all the crucial states in the north?
Well, you see, I would not go into the quantification of numbers, because politics is a very dynamic thing.
Yes.
And you never know what will happen next day. Like in Uttar Pradesh, we never expected what has actually happened. So I would not go this kind of straight jacket quantification of numbers, carrot and stick. But let me assure you that Modi will have to show the flexibility that is warranted to run a stable government, because you see, he has a wider agenda. He has an agenda of 2047.
Right.
And probably that wider agenda to make India strong, stable, and take it to the global world.
Yes.
So he would be also flexible, but at the same time, he would
Yes.
also probably succeed in impressing upon the coalition partners
Right.
about his agenda and their role in achieving that agenda. And the kind of seasoned politicians they are, Certainly, they have a right to put their claims, but they have also the flexibility to understand the larger partners' constraints. And railway, you were mentioning, I'm surprised that Ashwani is doing extremely well in railways,
Yes.
and Gadkari is doing extremely well in surface transport. So there are certain constraints which probably Modi would like to sell them, and there are there are other things to offer like the special packages. There are
Yes.
so many other plum positions like appointment of governors and other things. There are hundreds and hundreds of things through which it's not just the cabinet, but it's not the end of the coalition and
Right.
the demands. There will be so many things which will be coming up for grab in the or even after the formation of the cabinet. So
Right.
I think all of them will probably show the flexibility, and there will be a smooth transition to the Modi 3 government.
Right, absolutely. And loaves of fish and office, that's a term that was used in the past. I think it's coming back into our lexicon, as are many other expressions like coalition dharma, I'm sure, and the NDA convener. But Banuchandar, the TDP, it wants a special economic package for Andhra Pradesh, and it wants the revival of its capital project Amravati. How flexible will Chandrababu Naidu be for cabinet berths? Will he take a special package? What will he choose? What are his priorities right now, given the fact that he wants to consolidate his hold in Andhra Pradesh?
Just a quick point on the coalition of Dharma, and I'll just come to that point, Sandeep,
Yes.
if you'll allow me. See, first is if you look at the party, the number of seats that both the TDP and JDU has, okay, assuming that even one of these go away, the NDA will still have more than 272, right?
Right.
So I think people will have that in mind, because you don't want to be that one party that leaves the alliance but still the government continues, right? So unless the BJP manages to upset both of these parties simultaneously, or both of these are more than two parties simultaneously, the coalition will sort of survive. Okay, that's number one. Number two is like independents would not want this government to fall, because like they would have struggled a lot to become MPs, and they would want the BJP government to continue.
Yes.
Right? Now, number three is the symbiotic relationship. Obviously, with JDU, like the state government is dependent on BJP numbers, and the central government needs JDU numbers, right? So that is clear. Then comes to your point. Okay, with PDP doesn't need the numbers in the state, right? But PDP needs BJP for resources, for the reasons that you mentioned, right? The special package, okay, building of Amaravati and so on. The other point is PDP cannot align with the Congress Congress at all. Okay, it will be political suicide for it. So these constraints are there. So it's not like exactly black and white, and PD and the smaller parties can blackmail the BJP for more and more resources, right? So all of these are heavy, weathered political players, and they will know their constraints. And in fact, in the special package, I think there's going to be a lot of dicing and slicing, and BJP will agree to one thing now, one thing 2 years later, and all those sorts of mixing and matching will happen. Right. So one last point before I give it back to you is, see, we should remember that like the age of the leaders also matter, because they will have their legacies in mind. Prime Minister Modi is 73, Naidu is 74, Nitish is 73. They don't have any more. Yeah, they don't have any time to play games, go back, come forth, come back again, and so on. So they will focus on that. I think they would have been chastised by going away and coming back. And I think now the alliance is what I would call is in a Goldilocks situation. So I think all the policies will be within these constraints, which is not looking terrible as of now. But come, like what Brijesh was saying, come Bihar elections. Okay, maybe that is the time there can be shakiness. But as I said before, even if JDU alone leads, the government will survive, and JDU will also know that.
Right. So a Goldilocks situation, and more grays than black and white, as Banuchandar mentioned. But Brijesh, there's a talk of this demand for the TDP to get the speaker's position.
Yeah.
How critical is the speaker going to be in the Lok Sabha, given the fact that these are parties which don't have the huge numbers, and they're possibly wary of being swallowed up by the BJP, 16 seats and 12 seats. So where does the speaker fit in this equation?
Whenever you have a coalition government, I'm not saying that this is applicable only to this government. Whenever you have a coalition government, parties want to, like we saw in the state of Bihar, the person who had the speaker can thwart off many mini rebellions.
And in Maharashtra.
And in Maharashtra also.
Yes.
And how he changes the entire composition of the game. But if you don't have your guy at the top,
Yes.
situation can be completely different. You
Right.
can have a reverse operation Lotus on the TDP and also
Yes.
on the JDU, and
Right.
the entire situation might change.
Right.
I think what we've been given to understand by TDP sources is that they
Yes.
are very, very keen. And they are
Right.
kind of insisting on the post of speaker. And they say
Yes.
like that is one of the how this is how negotiation starts. You start
Right.
ask for 100. In your mind that 25
Yes.
is the upper limit on which I can settle.
Right.
But the TDP has conveyed to the government that speaker is one of those non-negotiable
Right.
scenario right now. I'm not saying that the government will back down and
Yes.
accept everything
Yes.
which these guys are to offer. But honestly speaking, if you ask me, I don't think that these two state leaders are also going to be impressed by just by doling out of special packages or the post of
Right.
governors and all.
Right.
They would also want a proper ministerial berth in the government. It is not that
Right.
that you can have top four. Nobody wants external affairs ministry
yes.
or nobody wants defense and all. It doesn't
Right.
do much to them. But these ministries, rural development, agriculture, railways
Yes.
and all,
Where
I
you
think
have a
there's going to
direct
be
link
pretty,
with the
pretty
constituents.
intense bargaining,
Right.
because they also know that the
Yeah.
government is dependent on them.
Right.
And they know how BJP behaves, and they are an absolute power, and they know how BJP behaves and they don't have an absolute power.
Right.
And flexibility part, I think, as we discussed yesterday, Sandeep, Prime Minister, when it comes to dealing with Nitish Kumar,
Yes.
has shown what he will do in the next 5 years.
Right.
He displays enormous level of flexibility
Yes.
when the situation doesn't suit him, and he's in the need of the person concerned.
Right.
So when Nitish Kumar, they needed Nitish Kumar, despite all kind of statement, all kind of bravado and
Yes.
all, they accepted Nitish Kumar quietly and went ahead with, despite a complete opposition by their state unit of Bihar.
Yes, absolutely. But coming back to the speaker, that is a position that was held by the TDP, if you remember, in 2002. GCM Bala Yogi held it for 2 years.
The
Then
conscience vote.
Yes.
If you remember the conscience vote, which
Absolutely.
led to fall of Vajpayee government.
Yes.
So I think, that is the reason why they feel that, that if you have got speaker,
Yeah.
you kind of save your
You're safe.
flock.
Yes, you keep your flock together.
You
And
are in a
indeed-
powerful position.
So you heard it here, that speaker is going to be a key bargaining chip between the Chandrababu Naidu's party, the TDP, and the centre. But Dr. Verma, the post of speaker being up for bargain, you think? Will the BJP permit the speaker to be from a coalition partner?
It all depends, Sandeep, on the bargaining, powers, and also the negotiation capabilities of rival different parties. I mean, you see, we cannot take one particular point as if it is non-negotiable. As Brijesh was saying, that the TDP sources tell that this is non-negotiable thing.
No, they're starting with this. I didn't say that.
If you Brijesh, come with this kind of a mindset, then probably you are risking the entire, friendship and coalition, government. So I think, given the facts that they are senior leaders and they are quite they were 70s now, there should be some flexibility. If you are young and very young and you have a long inning to play,
Yes.
then probably you have that kind of rigidity. But
Right.
but both are restricted by the number they have already achieved, and therefore I think there would be a good number of flexibility. Certainly with 240, 41 numbers, BJP would certainly not like to compromise on the post of Lok Sabha Speaker.
Right.
But let us see, you never know, because Modi's wider agenda is that Viksit Bharat up to 2047, and therefore compromises here and there cannot be ruled out.
Right, compromise can't be ruled out. But let's move to Bihar and Banuchandar. You have the JDU, and the JDU's had a long history of association with the NDA. Of course, both Nitish Kumar and George Fernandes were part of NDA cabinets. Very key positions, first as defense minister. George Fernandes was, of course, the defense minister, and Nitish was the railway minister. What would the JDU want now from this new government, NDA 3? What would Nitish Kumar's priorities be?
Nitish Kumar would definitely try to get agriculture, rural development, or railway, like what Brijesh was saying. So all of these will have direct impact on the economy of Bihar. And he will look at the next 1.5 years, right? That is his time frame. And he also knows that the people have rewarded the JDU this time, but his position as chief minister will be on the line when it comes to the state election. So he will try to see try to do as much as possible in the economic front to get things done. But where the flashpoint might be will be the Uniform Civil Code, okay, and the Nitish has promised caste-based reservations. I think there is going to be like a bit of a debate and deliberation, and maybe they'll drop both or do something with amended clauses and so on. So we have to see the details, but I think Nitish will focus on getting maximum mileage on the economic front, at least in the next 1.5 years.
Right. Nitish will focus on those ministries. What about the smaller ministries, the smaller parties, Brijesh? I mean, what are you hearing about what they are asking for?
Well, LJP said that, they are interested in one senior ministry and also a respectable stake in the next assembly election.
Right.
Because they know that, that the more is an offing. And I think, if you ask a Chirag Paswan,
yes,
or if you ask even a Chandrababu Naidu or most of these regional Satatraps,
right,
they would be extremely happy to be the chief minister of their state,
yes,
rather than to be a minister at the center. They would want their acolytes all,
right,
like, their family and something to be representing them at the state. So I think Chirag is also looking for a decent chunk of seat sharing agreement as far as the state of Bihar, right, is concerned. This is what we have been given to understand.
Right. So
but Ham is also, HAM, yes, also said, right, that boss, we are also, just because we have one number, yes, doesn't mean that we can be
don't rule us out.
So we should also be given one ministry and just. But I think one of these MOS posts and all, because one thing is also there, yes, that 22 ministers have lost, yes, this election.
Yes, absolutely.
So apart from the key portfolios, you have 22 new vacancies. So right, the government has lot of positions to juggle with as far as
yes,
this accommodating its allies with lower number of seats.
Right, absolutely. So I think it's going to be a very crowded train, the NDA in its third avatar, as opposed to the first two installments of the Modi government, where you had the NDA all but in name. You had one or two portfolios that were given to ministers, to allies, and now you have the whole debate opening up. It's any guess what is going to happen in the next couple of days, as these rounds of intense bargaining are underway even as we speak right now, in the run-up to the swearing in a few days from now. But thank you very much for joining us this evening, Banuchandar, Nagarajan, Dr. Verma, and my colleague Brijesh Pandey. This is a story that we are going to be watching very closely, how the allies are going to play for the cabinet berths, why they want the berths that they want, a story that we'll be following very closely. Thanks for watching. Today is the 40th anniversary of Operation Blue Star. In case you don't know what Operation Blue Star is, on this day, the Indian Army entered the Golden Temple to neutralize Khalistani terrorists who had fortified the complex. In the military operations that followed, 83 soldiers and nearly 500 civilians were killed. Operation Blue Star remains India's single bloodiest insurgency-related death toll. But the embers from Blue Star continue to flicker 40 years later. Amritpal Singh, a radical Sikh preacher espousing Khalistan in 2024, has just won a Lok Sabha seat in the 2024 Lok Sabha elections. Sarabjit Singh, the son of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's assassin, Bian Singh, is also a member of parliament in the Lok Sabha. But could Operation Blue Star have been avoided? Because just 5 months before the Indian Army entered the Golden Temple, there was another operation that had been rejected by the government, Operation Sundown, a commando-style operation to capture Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. And joining me to discuss this is my colleague Deepak Badana, who's been looking very closely at the Khalistan-related stories on News9 Plus. Over to you, Deepak.
It's 40 years now, sir, but embers of this movement still somehow survive. And today, some of the most prominent of them are members of the Indian Parliament.
Yes, imagine that. Two people who you least expected to be in Parliament. Amritpal Singh, the story that you did following Khalistan revival, the Khalistan
the Khalistan reborn story.
The Khalistan reborn story is a member of Parliament. He's in prison right now in Assam. But you have, on the other hand, Bian Singh's killer's son. Remember, he's done nothing wrong, of course. He just happened to be born to Bian Singh's house. But the plank that he fought these elections for was the fact that he was the son of Indira Gandhi's assassin.
Yeah.
And his father assassinated Indira Gandhi. He was a police bodyguard. He was a sub-inspector of police. He was an inspector who was meant to protect the Prime Minister, but because Prime Minister Indira Gandhi had ordered Operation Blue Star on the 31st of October, they shot her dead. And he is playing on that legacy, reminding the hardliners in Punjab that he's the son of Indira Gandhi's assassin. And that's how he got elected.
You know, it's just surprising. When you look at the history of Punjab, it seems to be a series of mistakes, you know, missed chances. I believe Operation Sundown is yet another one of those things that one can only wonder what could have been had that taken place.
Yes, absolutely. So Operation Sundown, for those of you not familiar with it, was an operation that was planned by the government in late 1983, and this was meant to kidnap Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale while he was in one of those hostels around the Golden Temple, near the Golden Temple. That's where he would hold the darshans, and that's when the killings had already begun in Punjab.
He'd set up his own darbar.
He'd set up a darbar, and he'd be flanked by, you know, bodyguards, and very clearly at that time, this movement had begun gathering momentum, and that's when the government came up with this plan to capture Bhindranwale before it was too late. And so they reached out to the UK, to the SAS specifically. It was actually MI6 that they first reached out to, and they said, listen, we are planning this special forces operation. Could you help us plan it? And the SAS, which is the Special Air Services, the elite unit of the British military, they sent down a colonel. And this colonel came and he actually studied the layout of the Golden Temple and the surrounding buildings, and he advised them on a plan to what was the best way to capture Bhindranwale in that hostel that he was, Guru Nanak Niwas, that he was staying in. And this was an operation that they rehearsed. They had in fact even created a mock-up of this particular hostel in Sarsawa, which is the base of the special group. The special group is a very secretive elite unit. It reports directly to RNAW. It's under, it's entirely staffed by the Indian Army. It's a battalion-sized special forces unit, but it operates under RNAW. It's a very secretive outfit. In those days, it was trained for counter-terrorist operations. I mean, this is 1983 when you didn't have special forces like the NSG, which was counter-terrorist units. The NSG was in fact set up after that.
I believe some of SG's first operations were in fact done in Assam in the northeast.
Yes. So SG was set up with the assistance of the Israeli military. The IDF trained the first operatives of the special group. The Sayeret Matkal, the elite Israeli counter-terrorist units, trained the first SG members. And so the SG was going to be the outfit that would carry out Operation Sundown. And they, like I said, they created this mock-up of the Guru Nanak Niwas and they rehearsed over it. And the operation was to heli-drop onto the roof of this hostel, that you would have commandos coming in 2 Mi-4 helicopters to the roof of this hostel. They would capture Bhindranwale, and then there would be an extraction from the ground, that you would have APCs, armored personnel carriers, that would rush in. They would put Bhindranwale into those APCs and then quickly exfiltrate. That was the plan. And this is what they had rehearsed for over several weeks. But unfortunately, the government, in its wisdom, chose not to greenlight this operation.
And that's because of the casualties that would inevitably take place.
They asked the army unit, that was the SG, what a reasonable assessment of casualties were going to be. And they gave a high figure, which would be something like a quarter of the attacking force that could be potentially knocked out by Bhindranwale's armed detail. They even said that the helicopters could be targeted. So I think the government realized that possibly a commando operation wouldn't be the right choice. And so they went to the Indian Army. And General Sundarji, one of our most legendary army chiefs, was then the Western Army commander, and he promised to rid the Golden Temple of Bhindranwale in a few hours if not days.
And with no casualties. I think that
with
was
a minimal amount of casualties. Because I think what they had, Sundown was meant to be a surgical operation, that very special forces driven operation. And the Indian Army at that time, this was 40 years back, it didn't have the kind of capability of assaulting, fighting in built up areas, like the kind of expertise that you have today after 4 decades. Fighting in built up area, special forces operations in urban areas was still a very emerging concept in those days, in the early 80s. It was very untried, it was untested. And if you ask me why the SAS, if you remember just 4 years before that, you had the very famous siege of the Iranian embassy, which after the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran, you had radicals taking the Iranian embassy hostages inside the Iranian embassy. And you had the SAS that staged a fantastic special forces operation, a very precise operation in the middle of a very crowded London suburb. They assaulted the embassy and they freed all the hostages with minimal casualties. So therefore they reached out to the SAS initially in late 1983, and the person who actually did a lot of the parlaying and the back and forth between India and the UK was, no surprise, Ramnath Kao, who was the head of the, who was special advisor to Prime Minister Gandhi, and he had come back in his second avatar.
This was the man who had founded RAW in the first place.
The founder of the RNAW, and he had, of course, Bangladesh was one of his biggest operations where he trained the Mukti Bahini, and he returned almost a decade after Bangladesh in 1981 as special advisor to Prime Minister Gandhi. And in fact, it was him who came up with this idea for a special forces operation. But then the government decided not to do it, and they said, we'll send the army. And I think that was a grave miscalculation, because they anticipated the militants coming out with their hands raised. Who would take on the Indian army? And that decision, the go-ahead for the Indian army to move in was on the 1st of June. And a few days later, the operation began on the 4th of June. And this continued for almost 3 days. And there was intense fighting. And that explains the kind of death toll. Nearly 500 civilians died.
Yeah.
Army soldiers died. It was a bloodbath, if you look at it. And it was this operation, the failure of Blue Star, that actually leads people to wonder maybe Sundown would have been a better option. A surgical, precise operation to bring Bhindranwale out of that hostel complex that he was in.
Now cut to 40 years later.
Yes.
Punjab at that point had just started reaping the benefits of the Green Revolution.
Yes.
It was India's most prosperous state, a state that famously contributed almost 10% of the Indian army, despite being just 2% of the populace.
Yes.
And it was heavily industrialized. Hero, incidentally, comes from there. You had hosiery and
Yes.
a number of things coming. But Punjab today is a far cry from the happy place that it was.
Yes.
And this is despite the fact that India has managed to actually eradicate an insurgency, which in
Yes.
itself is a very difficult proposition. And now we have 2 avowed Khalistanis, or at least 1 avowed Khalistani,
Yes.
who is now a member of parliament. How do you see, the next few days or the road ahead for Punjab?
Well, Deepak, the fact is that Punjab, while we may have stamped out militancy, the deindustrialization of Punjab that happened in the militancy years, which is all through the 80s, right up to the mid-90s, a decade of insurgency where, as you correctly pointed out, the most prosperous agricultural breadbasket of India that had a lot of industries located, you saw a flight of capital, you saw a deindustrialization where industrialists were moving their plants and factories away from Punjab. Who wants to invest in a state where you have no security, you have no protection of your business interests? Money is a coward, very simply. Money follows peace, prosperity, stability. That deindustrialization of Punjab that took place in the 80s and right up to the 90s, Punjab has still not recovered from it. So a lot of the problems you see today, which is unemployment, drug addiction, this rootlessness, the youth wanting to leave Punjab and migrate, doing whatever they need to do, become illegal migrants, sell their land. All of this is, I think, a long-term consequence of that havoc that we saw in the 80s and the early 90s. And preachers like Amritpal, Bian Singh's son, who are now in parliament, are a manifestation of that angst that's still there in Punjab. But, quickly a caveat, Deepak. The fact is that while they may be separatists, while they're pursuing a separatist agenda, the fact is that they've both, in some way, espoused their belief in the Indian democratic process. They have not taken arms against the Indian state. They've gone and they've contested elections and they've won Lok Sabha seats, and now at least one of them would be in parliament. So that's a kind of a vindication in the Indian democratic process, that here you have this irony of two people who are espousing separatism choosing to be part of the democratic process.
See, one of the things that's always curious to me is that populist preachers such as, say, Amritpal, they claim to have the panacea for all the ills that plague their society. But if you hear them, everything that they offer is actually quite intangible. And those are intangible ideas that they talk about.
Yes.
They'll talk about izzat and honor.
Yes.
Things that, when Amritpal says that Punjab hasn't been given the respect that it deserves, it's simply impossible to quantify what that means.
Yes.
Right. And so it's an easy question to raise and it's a difficult answer. Now what we've done is, another ironical thing about the same man is that while at one point he had openly stated his desire to secede from India as a union,
yes,
he also felt comfortable enough to participate in the electoral process.
Yeah.
And I think one of the key things when you join this process is actually to reaffirm your belief in the constitution and in that nation.
Yes.
Don't you see a sort of duplicity here?
No, I don't see any duplicity whatsoever. And the short answer to this is the fact that I'm happier looking at both of them being inside the parliament than outside on the streets, rabble rousing, and possibly picking up arms against the Union of India. The fact that they are going to be, let's hope, responsible members of parliament in the house, they will have to abide by a set of rules, without which they can't enter the Lok Sabha. So it's good to have people like this join the mainstream. However radical they may be, they've chosen to join the democratic process and debate their issues in parliament rather than pick up arms and fight for violent secessionism, which is what the Punjab movement was all about. The terrorism, that phase of Khalistani terrorism in Punjab was all about for more than a decade. But that's a long discussion there, Deepak. We'll continue it some other time. And 40 years of Operation Blue Star, a military operation that Punjab has not quite recovered from even today.